Hello, and welcome to the JNet Book Review. My name is Rabbi Mendel Winner, and today we're going to be reviewing the Chumash, better known as the 5 books of Moses. The word Torah, which the Chumash is known as, also comes from the word Hira, which is instruction and lesson. Because not only are we learning the Chumash to know Jewish history and to see how every one of the 613 mitzvahs originated in the Chumash, but we're looking for inspiration and life lessons in every single verse and on every single line. There are many different ways of learning Chumash. Going back to the Cheder, where children learn with their teacher, Chumash with the legendary Rashi commentary. There is the Parsha that's read in Shul on Shabbos, where you can review the weekly Torah portion, which is divided by the weeks. There's also Chitas, which is the daily Torah portion. So on Sunday you learn Sundays, Monday you learn Monday's lesson. The Alter Rebbe said that a Jew should live with the times. Now, we're not talking about the New York Times, of course. We're talking about the Torah Times, the everlasting and timeless message that week's and that day's Torah portion is teaching us. Before we begin the review, I would like to go over a few pointers. When it comes to translations, the translator is faced with a very tough challenge. They have to have a proper command in the original language, in Hebrew, and then the language that they're translating into in English. Now, with every translation, it's inevitable that the subtleties of the original translation will be lost because it's impossible to convey the full message into another language. If you would go ahead and purchase an English Bible online or in any random store, that Bible in English is translated from Latin, which in turn is translated from the Greek, which in turn is translated from Hebrew. So you have 3 translations that over time, unfortunately, went away from the origin and the authenticity of the original text. That's why the books that we're going to be reviewing today were translated by a team of rabbis and scholars that have a fluency and a command and are very knowledgeable, of course, in the original Hebrew and in English. So it is the best and closest, the most accurate as possible we can get to the original. The original Torah, the 5 books of Moses, were dictated by God and transcribed by Moshe. Now, it was written pretty much cryptic, semi-coded, and therefore if you would read it without any commentary, it would be almost impossible to understand the full story. That's why when translating the Chumash, each translation varies to how much commentary they incorporate in the text, so you get a better understanding of what's going on. I'm going to begin today's review with the classic Stone Chumash, which I have in front of me. Many of you are familiar with it, seen in Shul, and this is the oldest one out of the few that we have here. Now, when they translated the English text, they exclusively stuck to literal translation. So they'll take a pasuk and they'll say, Hashem spoke to him to convey the message to them, which is literally how to translate the verse. At times, it could be a little bit challenging to fully understand the full picture. I mean, who is Hashem talking to and who is the them? Is Hashem talking to Moshe to talk to the Jewish people? Is Hashem talking to Moshe and Aaron to convey to the elders or to the Kohanim? That's why commentary is so essential. And therefore they included on bottom commentary where they collect from Rashi and of course from the Ramban and other medieval and more modern commentators that give insight and show how to learn the text. An important fact that comes to mind when studying the Stone Chumash, being that it sticks to literal translation, you may have a hard time understanding the full background and context. So take, for example, in the 10 Commandments, one of them is not to kidnap. Now, the word in Hebrew is used lesignev, which literally means don't steal. Without commentary, you would just assume that it means don't steal, which of course is a negative commandment, but it's not part of the 10. What they do in the Stone Chumash is that they translate it literally, don't steal. Yes, on the commentary on bottom, they're going to expound upon that it means don't steal people, which is kidnapping, but in the actual text, you won't have it. So for a person that's looking to learn Chumash in the text alone and wants to get the full background, they may miss the commentary. One aspect of this Chumash which I dislike slightly is that there's very little inspiration and life lessons. So they stick to, if a person wants to study the text and the Chumash and the stories and the explanation of it, that's great. But to apply these life lessons on a practical level in a person's personal life, there isn't much to it. I'd recommend this Chumash for a person that wants to study the text in its original without any commentators, and if they choose to look at commentators and commentaries later on, of course they're welcome to, but they want to look at their translation as literal as possible. That's the Stone Chumash for you. The next Chumash I want to review is the newly famous Chabad House Chumash. And they did a phenomenal job in translating the original text, but including commentary. Primarily Rashi, which is the classic when studying Chumash, of course. But they still wanted to retain the literal translation. So what they did was they have the literal translation in bold font, and then in non-bold font, they included commentary and explanation. So you can basically fill in the blanks. When it says Hashem spoke to him to tell them, you know who the him is, and they put in who to them is. They also include the chronological order of what took place when. See, the Chumash wasn't written in the order that it took place, and therefore it's essential to understand that this piece actually historically took place before that piece, and so on. Now, the actual translation and commentary that they included was primarily based off Rashi, and they also include a tremendous amount of the Rebbe's Sichos and the Rebbe's talks to understand the full picture, and so on. What I love about this Kehos Chumash is that you can sit down and read the text alone and have a full understanding and picture. It flows smoothly. You get the full background, the reasoning behind it, and the deeper dimension all included in the translation. And of course, if you want to just keep to the literal text, you can focus on the bold. They also included commentary. The authors of this translation collected from Hasidic works relating to understanding the text, to understanding the mitzvahs, or the story that is being told, and a deeper Hasidic and Kabbalistic explanation, which gives very powerful, timeless life lessons and inspiration that you can take home from this week's parsha. Another great component of this Chumash is the introduction before every single parsha of what's going to take place in that parsha and powerful life lesson from that parsha. I would recommend this Chumash for a person that doesn't have much time to open up many different books and research many different things. They just want to sit down and get an all-encompassing, rich lesson and idea and background of that week's Torah portion or that week's daily Chumash with full insights and reasoning and logic and explanation in one sitting, included in the text with a nice, beautiful flow. This is probably the best one for you. The only challenge that some people may have with this Chumash is that if you look at the text alone, it may be a little bit overwhelming because they include so much commentary in the actual text. Our next Chumash is the Gutnick Chumash, which is based off the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The actual translation is kept much more to the literal translation, yet whenever there is commentary of Rashi that's essential to understanding the text, they'll put in parentheses, which is great for an easy read and understanding what's going on. Afterwards, if you want to expand a little bit deeper, you have the classic questions, where they'll bring a few different commentators on Chumash explaining and answering some of these core questions and give their explanation. From there, you have the Teres Menachem, where they draw from the Rebbe's works, where he brings questions and challenges on all the other commentators, and then introduce his novel approach, which clarifies all the difficulties. Another section here is the Sparks of Chassidus. They have this small gray box of some Kabbalah and Chassidus. If you want to go a little deeper and esoteric, a deeper dimension on that week's Torah portion. Following that, you have the last word, which is perhaps what you can say the marching orders, a practical lesson and inspiration that you can take away from that week's parsha. In the beginning of the Gutnick Chumash, they have the names of all the parshas, its deeper meaning, and an inspiring message from each name of the parsha. I recommend this Chumash for an individual that wants to try a little bit of everything. They want to learn the text in its literal sense. Then they want to try a little bit of a Chassidus, a little bit of inspiration, and then to see the Rebbe's approach about how to learn that week's parsha. Our final Chumash for today is the Steinsaltz Chumash, which includes the commentary of Rabbi Steinsaltz. A very strong focus on the Steinsaltz Chumash is highlighting the linguistic, historical, archaeological, and scientific information. So let's say, for example, it talks about the well that Yitzchak dug up. They're going to show pictures, archaeological discoveries of wells from that era. Different terms that are used in the Chumash, they're going to research the origins of the language. Let's say, for example, if there's a unique plant or species mentioned in the Chumash, they're going to find the scientific language. Just for a quick summary, I would recommend this Chumash, the Stone Chumash, for those that want to focus on the literal translation. If you want to have an all-encompassing, great read, easy flow, and full background, I would recommend the Kehos Chumash, where you have the commentary as well, and you can have just a great, well-rounded, knowledgeable idea of what the Torah is saying. For those that want to divide, focus on the text, then commentary, then Kabbalah, then powerful lessons. I would recommend the Gutnick Chumash, and finally the Steinsaltz Chumash, perhaps for the more academic individual that wants to go into the deep insight of Rabbi Steinsaltz, as well as the fascinating background where he focuses more on the historical, archaeological, and scientific ideas of certain parts of the Chumash. Today's book review has been brought to you by SeforimDeals.com. Unlock the wisdom of centuries with SeforimDeals. Get the best prices on holy books, from classic Torah texts to modern commentators. Visit SeforimDeals.com today and enrich your learning journey.